Hey everybody, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here, and today we are talking about vaccine passport apps because they have one serious problem, and that's a lack of trust. Now, this is actually a really interesting article coming from CNN, and I'm basically going to be quoting a lot of this, I think, verbatim. But I mean, think about this. As they've laid it out, the next time you attend a wedding or a concert or visit a place of worship like your church or synagogue or whatever that is, you eat indoors at a restaurant, you even go to work, you may need to actually show digital proof that you've been vaccinated for COVID-19. So here's what's going on. Last Friday, a few days ago, New York became the first state in the United States to roll out basically a verification app for the vaccine, which is being referred to as a digital vaccine passport. Now, what they're doing is they're using IBM's Excelsior Pass app, which leans on blockchain and displays a personalized QR code to verify your health status. Now, the state has tested the app earlier in the month at Brooklyn, basically a Brooklyn Nets basketball game at the Barclays Center, and also a New York Rangers hockey game at Madison Square Garden. Now, vaccine verification apps could obviously play a key role in helping us get back to normal, but the companies behind them may first need to convince millions of Americans, we've all heard about data breaches, data mining, privacy violations and all of that. They have to convince millions of us that these apps don't pose a significant risk to our privacy. Now, in his announcement, Governor Andrew Cuomo specifically nodded to potential privacy concerns about the app with the promise, and I quote, of keeping personal information secure. Likewise, Steve LaFelice, who's the general manager of IBM Public and Federal Markets, said in a statement that the New York Digital Passport relies on, and I quote, a flexible and accessible tool that places security and privacy at its core. Now, obviously, not everybody is convinced here. Albert Fox Can, who is the founder and executive director of the Surveillance Technology Oversight Project and a fellow at NYU's School of Law, said, and I quote, some of these everyday life apps will create a new layer of digital infrastructure that was previously anonymous. You don't need that type of surveillance to pick up a quart of milk from a bodega, and I think he's completely right. Now, that said, let's move on, because basically one of the core privacy fears is the question of whether location or medical data will be collected and stored, and who will have access to that information. The companies behind these apps have said they will not store the data, but the perception could nonetheless dissuade many Americans from embracing and downloading an app, and I'm going to get to that soon. Now, according to Dr. Brian Anderson, the chief digital health physician at the non-for-profit MITRE, you might know MITRE from their attack profile. They also run their attack structure as they also run CVE. Big fan of MITRE's work, for the record. He said, and I quote, user trust is paramount in order for digital smart health cards to be successful in empowering individuals to demonstrate their vaccination status as society reopens. That's why it's imperative that companies are open and transparent in regards to their privacy policies so that individuals can make an informed decision about who they want to share their vaccination information with. And I think that is actually a really good point as well. I have consistently talked about transparency in data security, even when you're going through a data breach. It's one of those things that helps to reinsure your customers, or the public in this case. Now, obviously, Silicon Valley has tried its hand at tech solutions to help address this public crisis throughout 2020 and the pandemic, including things like exposure notification apps that would help stop the spread of COVID-19, but those really kind of fell short of what they were intended to do. Now, digital health passes could be a way for tech companies to make that meaningful impact as the US and other countries start reopening. However, these products must confront a number of concerns, including potential counterfeit vaccine cards, basically the digital divide, and perhaps most immediately consumer distrust and shifting norms about how technologies handle personal data. And this is actually, I think, a really good point, because Apple, for example, is currently rolling out push notifications to be more transparent with users about how data will be collected. They have this entire, labeling system for basically any app. But other tech giants like Facebook are just this black hole of data mining suck that grabs everything out here. So that obviously is a huge, huge problem. And we've heard about these kinds of things as well. And I think this really opens up a huge can of worms here when we are talking about digital privacy, and the fact that at first and foremost, it's a hearts and mind issue. The United States has been deeply divided during this pandemic to even talk about COVID, to say, oh, it's a hoax or it's BS or it's overblown or it's whatever. And the other side of it on the extreme end is never go out ever, and everybody else is kind of stuck in the middle saying, I'm going to play it safe. I'm going to, wear that mask and all of that, but I'm looking forward to just getting back to normal, and now we've got recent reports, that I read actually this morning that basically said we're probably going to have to get other COVID vaccines, in the same way that we get flu shots in perpetuity. And so we'll see where that goes. But this is a hearts and minds issue. When you have a huge segment of the population that simply distrusts what the media is saying, and then you combine that with, let's say that, the data breaches that we've had with Equifax or Marriott or SolarWinds or Microsoft being the latest two examples of this, trust is at an all-time low when it comes to these platforms, not to mention this violation of Facebook. Now, we also have another segment of the population that's clueless to all of this, or doesn't simply care that Facebook is hoovering up all of your information left and right, and so they'll probably adopt this passport thing. But as this becomes a standard in society, there are going to be a lot of people that simply resist this, which means we are probably going to see a lot of public videos in the same way that we saw people kicking in signs at like their local Target of, I'm not going to wear a mask and blah, 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 and like all these things. This is going to be the next evolution of that. And I think this is something that's rather important. Now, I find it interesting that, basically IBM is backing this. IBM has a really good track record with cybersecurity, offering cybersecurity services and platforms that a lot of enterprise corporations use. So that's a good sign. They're also backing this on blockchain, which is essentially a transactional technology. I'm not going to get into what blockchain is, but that actually helps to ensure security, and privacy. But we're going to see the kind of data that they collect that is part of that blockchain transaction. Is it simply a QR code? We're going to find out. The other thing, too, is that, as they mentioned with QR codes, what's stopping me from basically copying my QR code and selling it to somebody else as a vaccine passport? And so I think we're going to see a large black market arise from this, depending on, let's say, the scanner when I walk into my business. If it's not backed and validating that blockchain, I may simply be able to sell that QR code, and now I'm logging into multiple different places. We're going to see what happens with this, so I'm curious to see where this goes. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, but vaccine passport apps, are a huge problem. And the last thing that I want to mention with this as well is that we've seen a huge problem with app development. So many apps have integrated things like Facebook software development kit or Google Ads or all of these kinds of things that will basically data mine the bejesus out of you, even though, let's say, the app maker isn't doing that to make money. So these apps we have to make sure that they're clean, they've got good software composition analysis, they've got good software lifecycle, and that they are not integrating in these social media or advertising platforms that want our data because that's how they make money. There has to be a lot of guarantees for people to slowly come around to this. And quite frankly, there's going to be a segment of the population that will never adopt this unless they absolutely have to. In other words, I'm going to install this into my phone. I'm going to put it there. And as soon as I have this, I'm going to do this so I can get on a plane, and then I'm going to delete the app immediately. So we'll see where this goes. But I think this is going to be very interesting because I'm already seeing, as I'm tracking various social media across the entire political spectrum, a lot of grumbling about, the privacy side of this. And so this is a really serious problem that we're going to be coming into. And at the same token, we want to make sure that everybody's, being healthy and not getting this infection. So it's going to be a real balance that we're going to have to play. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, but that is your news of the day. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe and stay online. Thanks, everyone.